The studio lights of Jimmy Kimmel Live cast a harsh glow as the host introduced the next guest with his signature grin. What was meant to be a routine late-night interview was about to spiral into one of the most unforgettable confrontations in recent television history. When Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, delivered a response that left Kimmel momentarily speechless, the audience fell into a stunned silence. This was no ordinary exchange. It was a moment that would ignite fierce debate, dominate social media, and force a reckoning about accountability in the public eye. The show had started predictably enough. Kimmel's monologue skewered political figures, celebrity gossip, and viral internet moments with the polished rhythm that had made him a late-night staple for over 2 decades. The audience, nestled in the heart of Hollywood, laughed along, comfortable in the familiar cadence of jokes and punchlines. Then came the guest introduction. Joining us tonight is the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, here to talk about the administration's latest moves, or, as some might say, the latest mysteries, Kimmel quipped, his tone dripping with playful sarcasm. The crowd chuckled as Jean-Pierre walked onto the stage, dressed in a sharp blazer, exuding calm confidence. Polite applause greeted the arrival, though the predominantly liberal audience held a hint of skepticism. After all, this was a figure tasked with defending an administration Kimmel had frequently critiqued. As Jean-Pierre settled into the guest chair, Kimmel leaned forward, his expression a mix of curiosity and mischief. "I've got to ask," he began. "How do you explain policies that seem to change direction faster than a soap opera plot? One day it's this, the next it's that. Is there a secret decoder ring we're all missing?" The audience laughed, expecting a rehearsed diplomatic dodge, but Jean-Pierre's face remained steady, a flicker of intensity in the eyes. "Jimmy, that's a fair question," Jean-Pierre said, voice measured but firm. "But before we dive into policy, I'd like to ask you something. You've built a career holding people accountable for their words and actions. How do you reconcile that with your own past, like the comedy bits on The Man Show that wouldn't fly today?" The studio went quiet. Kimmel's grin faltered, replaced by a fleeting look of shock. What happened next turned a light-hearted segment into a cultural flashpoint that would be dissected for weeks. If you're seeing this moment for the first time, hit like and subscribe as we unpack how Karine Jean-Pierre flipped the script on one of late night's biggest names in a way no one saw coming. Jimmy Kimmel's journey to late-night royalty was a tale of reinvention. In the late 1990s, The Man Show, co-hosted by Kimmel, leaned into provocative frat house humor, sketches that objectified women and celebrated excess. By the 2020s, Kimmel had transformed into a progressive voice, delivering emotional monologues on healthcare, gun control, and political accountability. Media analyst Sarah Thompson noted in a recent profile, Kimmel's pivot was masterful. Many younger viewers don't even know his earlier work, which makes moments like this so jarring. His audience expected him to challenge guests from opposing political camps, often with sharp wit that played to the room. Karine Jean-Pierre, however, was not a typical guest. As White House press secretary, Jean-Pierre had navigated high-pressure briefings, facing relentless questions from journalists seeking cracks in the administration's narrative. With a background in political advocacy and communications, Jean-Pierre was known for composure under fire. Jean-Pierre's skill is in redirecting narratives, political strategist David Chen observed. She doesn't just answer questions, she reshapes the conversation. Kimmel's team likely saw the guest as an opportunity to land easy jabs, but Jean-Pierre had other plans. The stakes were high for both. For Kimmel, it was about maintaining credibility as a moral voice in comedy, a role he'd carefully cultivated. For Jean-Pierre, it was a chance to defend the administration on a platform often hostile to its policies, while showcasing the ability to hold ground in unfriendly territory. Beyond the studio, the exchange carried broader implications. In an era of polarized media, where late-night shows blurred the line between entertainment and political commentary, This moment tested whether hosts could be held to the same standards they applied to others. Jean-Pierre's opening salvo had shifted the dynamic. Kimmel, caught off guard, tried to regain footing with humor. "Well, it sounds like someone's been digging through my IMDb page instead of prepping policy answers," he said, forcing a chuckle. The audience laughed nervously, eager for familiar territory. Jean-Pierre didn't take the bait. "I believe in knowing who I'm speaking with," Jean-Pierre replied, leaning slightly forward. "Your show often calls out inconsistencies in public figures. That's fair, but it's also fair to ask why some inconsistencies, like your past sketches, get a pass while others are condemned." The silence in the studio was palpable. Cameras caught audience members exchanging uneasy glances, unsure whether to applaud or stay quiet. Kimmel's expression hardened as he processed the challenge. "Look, I've addressed that stuff before," he said, voice tightening. "People evolve. The person who did those bits isn't who I am now." It was a practiced response, one he'd used when old clips resurfaced, but in this live setting it felt less convincing. Jean-Pierre nodded, undeterred. "Evolution is important," she said. "But last month, you called for a senator to resign over comments made years ago, comments less offensive than some of your old sketches. You said, 'Words reveal character and some flaws can't be excused.' Why does that standard apply to others but not to you?" The audience murmured, the weight of the double standard sinking in. Off camera, producers could be seen signaling frantically, likely itching to cut to commercial, but Kimmel waved them off, perhaps sensing that dodging would amplify the moment's damage. "Context matters," Kimmel countered, his tone sharper. "I was doing comedy, playing a character. That senator was speaking as a public official." Jean-Pierre was ready. "So comedy excuses harmful stereotypes?" she asked, voice steady. "That's a convenient line, especially when you've criticized comedians for similar content. The rules seem to shift depending on who's in the hot seat." The exchange was no longer a gotcha. It was a dissection of accountability, playing out in real time on live television. Social media erupted as the segment aired. On X, Kimmel Jean-Pierre trended within minutes, with users posting clips of Jean-Pierre's responses. "Karine just turned Kimmel's own playbook against him," one post read, garnering thousands of likes. Another user countered, "Kimmel's past isn't the issue, Jean-Pierre's dodging policy questions." Pundits weighed in, with CNN's media critic noting, "This wasn't just a clash of personalities. It exposed how late-night hosts want to be seen as moral arbiters while sidestepping their own histories." The polarized reactions underscored the moment's cultural weight. Kimmel, a seasoned performer, tried to pivot. "All right, let's talk policy," he said, forcing a smile. "Your administration's economic plan, polls show most Americans feel it's not working for them. How do you sell a plan when people are struggling?" It was a calculated move, shifting to a topic where Jean-Pierre might falter. The audience leaned in, sensing a return to safer ground. Jean-Pierre didn't flinch. "I'm glad you brought that up," she said, pulling a small stack of papers from a folder. "I anticipated we'd discuss the economy, so I brought some data. These are independent reports showing job growth and wage increases under our policies, metrics your show hasn't covered in the 12 times you've mentioned our economic plan this year." She handed the papers to Kimmel, who took them with visible reluctance. "You're right that perception matters," Jean-Pierre continued, "but selective coverage shapes that perception. When your monologues focus on struggles but omit progress, it creates a narrative that's only half the story." The camera zoomed in on Kimmel's face as he scanned the documents, his usual quick wit absent. The audience, now fully engrossed, sensed the shift. This wasn't just about policy, but about the power of media to frame reality. "These are private reports," Kimmel said, voice strained. "Private?" Jean-Pierre replied, eyebrow raised. "They're public data, accessible to anyone, just like the public comments you've condemned on this show. The difference is, those people didn't have a platform to respond. The genius of Jean-Pierre's approach was clear. She hadn't just defended the administration, she'd exposed the contradiction between Kimmel's public persona and the selective lens of his show. Media scholar Elena Martinez later remarked, Jean-Pierre didn't just challenge Kimmel, she challenged the entire late-night model, which thrives on moral posturing while avoiding accountability for its own framing. Recognizing the segment was slipping away, Kimmel made a bold move. "You're right," he said, setting the papers down. "We don't always cover the full picture, and that's worth examining. But let me ask you this. Your administration's messaging often paints critics as enemies, not opponents. How does that square with your call for fairness?" It was a strong counter, momentarily putting Jean-Pierre on the defensive. Jean-Pierre paused, then responded with measured conviction. "We're not perfect," he said. "Our messaging can be sharp, especially in a media environment that amplifies division. But we've passed bipartisan laws, appointed critics to advisory roles, and listened to opposing views. Those efforts don't go viral, but they're real. The question is, why do shows like yours rarely highlight them?" The audience, initially divided, began to nod, drawn into the rare authenticity of the exchange. With the commercial break looming, Kimmel seized the moment to wrap up. "This wasn't what I expected tonight," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "But you've given us a lot to think about. We'll be right back." As the show cut to break, X exploded with reactions. "Karine Jean-Pierre just schooled Kimmel on his own show," one post declared, while another argued, "Kimmel handled it with class. Most hosts would have ducked." Clips racked up millions of views, fueling debates about media bias, personal evolution, and who gets to set the rules of accountability. When the show returned, Kimmel addressed the audience directly. "That was not the plan," he said, earning a laugh. "But maybe it's a conversation we need. Our guest called out inconsistencies, and while I don't agree with every angle, there's a point about fairness I can't ignore." Over the next few minutes, Kimmel reflected on his show's role in shaping narratives, admitting, "I've been quick to judge others without always looking at our own blind spots. That's something I'll think about moving forward." The aftermath was seismic. 3 writers from Kimmel's team faced internal review after Jean-Pierre's documents revealed selective coverage patterns. ABC issued a statement promising to evaluate its programming's editorial approach. Jean-Pierre's profile soared, with outlets praising her as a new breed of communicator. "She didn't just survive Kimmel's stage, she owned it," wrote The Washington Post. The exchange became a case study in media accountability. A study by the Pew Research Center found that late-night shows adjusted their political coverage post-incident, incorporating more policy details and fewer identity-based jabs. Universities added the clip to journalism curricula, with professors citing its demonstration of narrative control and premise-challenging rhetoric. What made this moment resonate wasn't the drama, but its deeper truth. Accountability is a universal standard, not a selective weapon. As cultural commentator David Brooks noted, "We're quick to demand transparency from those we oppose while excusing flaws in our own camp. This exchange forced us to confront that hypocrisy, not just in media, but in ourselves." In a divided nation, the Kimmel-Jean-Pierre clash offered a rare glimpse of what discourse could be: messy, uncomfortable, but ultimately revealing. If this story struck a chord, subscribe for more breakdowns of moments that cut through the noise to reveal the complexities of our shared reality.